You have questions. We have answers. Today we're doing a Q&A episode. I apologize if this is going to be a little bit scattered because we recorded this in two parts. We fielded some questions that we answered on camera last week, but we did not get to the full list of questions. So we're going to finish those up today, and it's all going to be combined into this one podcast that you are now listening to. Welcome back to the Life on Books podcast. My name is Tony. With me as always is Andy, a.k.a. Metafictional Meathead.
Hi, Tony.
Hello again. So Seth, a.k.a. Waste Mailing List on Instagram, asks, what have you learned about yourselves as readers and commentators on books?
Wow. Seth, do you have an answer to that?
Yeah, I do.
Why don't you go first? You certainly have more weight as a commentator than I think I do.
So what have I learned about myself as a reader and a commentator? As a reader, I think I've definitely become better at picking out books that I'm going to enjoy. Mm-hmm. And what I like is I like history. Mm-hmm. I like books that are unique, whether in the topic or the themes or the structure. I do like Asian literature quite a bit. And that's a little bit of a broad topic because there's a lot of nuance within that umbrella. But, and I've found that I really do best when I'm reading no more than two books at once, I think. So this is something I've kind of recently discovered. Towards the end of this year, there was that point where I think I had like 6 books going on at once. And I was like, this is just not good.
Yeah, I've kind of come to the same conclusion myself, especially lately as I've started to get, a little bit more active doing the jiu-jitsu thing. Mm-hmm. I have a real job with real hours now. Like, I was working at the gym. I used to be able to balance like 3 or 4 books at a time. Yeah. I think depending on the books, I can still kind of manage 3, but I think 2 is that sweet spot for me.
Yeah.
I'm not always great at actually sticking to that.
Right.
Because I do get a little
FOMO
and just kind of caught up in it all. I think something that another thing that I've come to the realization on, and I don't necessarily know if this is a bad thing or like, how I really would frame it, but I think part of reading the Savage Detectives has helped me pick up on this, like how much I've really romanticized being literary and well read. Yeah. And I think like all readers, you kind of have this just like underlying desire to read everything. Yeah. And be able to talk about such a wide variety of books. Mm-hmm. And I've always been aware that like I'm never going to have time to read all the books that I want to read or every book that's ever been published, and I'm not going to be able to talk deeply about everything. Yeah. But I think sometimes it's hard to put that desire to the side and try to just like focus on a couple of books and be able to talk really well about a small handful of books.
You have to come to grips with the fact that you're never going to read them all. Yep. And I definitely think that it's easy to lose sight of the fact that you'll get so much more out of every book you read if you really let yourself become immersed in it. Yeah. Which is hard to do if you're reading a lot of books at once.
Yeah. And I think as far as the commentator thing goes, like I'm still trying to figure that out for myself. I think I definitely have been less active on social media this year. I have not been the most. I've never been super active, but definitely in the past, like I was making more like posts on my feed about books that I had read. Whereas now, like sometimes it's just like a story post here and there. Yeah. I think part of that is trying to get away from what I was just talking about over romanticizing like being a a literary insider and kind of being in the know. And like I at the end of the day, like I do enjoy being a part of the online book community and having people that I can talk to about books, and I like sharing books that I read. I love doing the podcast and things like that. But like at the end of the day, I love to read.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, I especially with the shit I went through at the beginning of the year where I couldn't get myself to read.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just kind of like, I just want to read. And if I don't post about anything, like that's still okay, because I read and I was moved and I have thoughts about these books. Like, again, I've talked about it before. Like I do want to find a way to, you know, share more about what I'm reading, but I don't want to get so caught up in the idea that I have to or want to share more, I'll say content, just for lack of a better phrase, that it gets in the way of me getting reading done.
I mean, that's the thing, right? It's like with the amount of content I put out now, I could be reading more. Just I'm making videos about books and
right.
It's an interesting question. What have I learned about myself as a commentator? I think first of all, I realize that we say too much. I think at one point I messaged you because you can, scan a transcript.
Yeah.
And I did a search for the phrase and it came up like 162 times. And I was like, okay, well, so I've been trying to work on that. That's particularly true for the podcast. Just kind of trying to eliminate speech crutches, and that's certainly not my only one. But as far as the short form stuff goes on Instagram and TikTok, it's interesting, right? Like I mentioned before that I asked people why they followed me, like what was the post that made them hit follow.
Yeah.
And quite a few of the responses were things similar to, you give such a deep, insightful critique or review of books that other people aren't giving. And that's super flattering, and I appreciate that. But I also watch my own videos, and I go, do I though?
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I'm just my own worst critic.
Yeah.
And I watch other people's content, and I think they're doing as much as I'm doing in that regard, if not more in some cases. So that's been something I've been continuing to grapple with. I definitely learned that I don't like being negative. If I didn't enjoy a book, I'm not afraid to say that, but I've really come to realize that I dislike the phrase, that book sucks.
Yeah.
Which you will always get. You'll always get some smooth brain person commenting, book sucks, book's overrated, whatever. And it's like, well, that's not a critique. That's just an opinion.
Right.
That happened a lot with Yellowface. And I kind of challenged somebody on it. They said, oh, the writing was so bad, I had to put it down. I said, what was bad about it? And they basically just listed synonyms for bad. You know what I mean? They were just like, well, it wasn't good and it was boring. And it's like, okay, but tell me which parts, like pick up the book, flip it open and say, you see when she said this is, I didn't like this because, give me an example of something like, so, I found that as a commentator, I try to avoid just boring platitudes or just throwing adjectives at something. I try to give it a little bit more meat, but
that's another one for me. Like on both sides of it, whether I like a book or dislike a book, just not using a boring basic platitude.
Right.
Like I'd like to actually say something about the book.
Right. I'm just trying to give a list of superlatives.
Right. Which is hard to do.
It's hard to do in any capacity, but when you have 90 seconds or less, or
right.
if you're doing YouTube shorts, even 60 seconds, it's like, gosh, what can you really say about a book in 60 seconds? So,
right.
I've also kind of learned that less is more. When I first started, and this isn't necessarily as a commentator, but maybe more as a content creator, when I first started making videos, I looked at what was out there and I said, there's people that aren't doing lots of B-roll of the books. There's people that aren't doing very artistic creations of their reviews. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I'm going to do all of these cool things, and that no one cared, no one watched it.
Right.
And I would spend all this time finding the right backing track for the music and maybe some stock footage if I couldn't film what I needed. And then, I just started to scrape all that away, and it was just me talking to the camera about the book. And that's when the content really started to blow up. So it was just a less is more type of approach. But great question from Seth. Why don't we field one of yours? We'll go back and forth for a bit here.
Okay. This is from The Ghastly Fop. What was your favorite sentence or passage from a novel this year?
Oh,
Probably should have messaged you about that one beforehand, but
yeah, I would need some time to think about that. There's that one scene from Hard Rain Falling that's was in the excerpt that we read.
yeah.
That we were like, oh yeah, we're on board
Yep.
with this book. So that probably definitely makes the cut. Oh God. I have like photos of quotes of all these books, but I didn't
Yeah.
flag a lot of them, except for Omensetter's Luck here. So let me just see if I can find something that stands out. I would need to think about it.
Okay.
Great question though.
Yeah, it is a good one. For me, I think there's definitely some recency bias to this, but one, and I posted about this on Patreon. It's out of the Savage Detectives. Just a single sentence. I forgive me, I don't remember all of the context around it, but the line is, "Literature isn't innocent."
Yes. Great line.
Like, I think it ties into a lot of what I was just saying about this idea of romanticizing being literary.
Yeah.
And it's a sentence that I've kind of been thinking. It's been in the back of my mind like since I read it. And I know I talked about this in the live chat we did, like especially within the Savage Detectives, and I believe Bolano's work as a whole. There's this kind of overall theme and idea of the futility of literature, and how like it can be an important part of your life, but it's not the answer.
Yeah.
And I think, to me, like, I'm thinking about the characters in that novel, like, in the first section, Garcia Madero like kind of throws away what seemingly, on paper is going to be a bright future to just fart around Mexico City with some bum poets.
Right.
Like, literature on the surface kind of ruined his life there.
Right.
And I know for me, this is true. I'm sure a lot of our listeners, this is true. It's very easy, even if what you're reading is a very challenging and complex work, it's very easy to dig into that as kind of an escape from everything else that's going on. Even if it's not like a quote unquote comfort read.
Right.
It's very easy to be like, if it's something as mundane as not wanting to do the dishes.
Right.
To be like, I'm gonna sit and read for an hour.
Right.
I don't want to do the dishes. I don't want to do my laundry. I don't want to cook. I'm gonna read.
Right.
And on the surface, maybe it's a one-off thing. Like, maybe you read for 30 minutes and then go do the dishes. Like, that's not terrible.
Yeah.
But, if you're using reading or literature as a crutch to escape from all these other things, it's not innocent.
Yeah.
And I think that single sentence, like I said, has just been living rent-free in my head, because I think, for good reasons, both you and I and our followers and readers or audience really look at literature and being well read and reading a lot and collecting books as these high level important facets of our lives, which I agree with.
Yeah.
But if you're not careful, you can kind of overlook that there can be some downsides to that.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think again, there's some recency bias because I just read that line like a week and a half ago, but that one has just been kicking around in my head. Like, just such a simple line that there's so much to.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I would say that, or pretty much anything I've flagged from the Spectre
Nice.
would be my favorite passages.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look. This is another great question from Seth. Two more great questions from Seth, Waste mailing list. When's the sexy Life on Books calendar coming out? But a more serious question, soon, Seth. The more serious question is, what blind spots, if any, is your reading? Jesus Christ. Seth from Waste mailing list asks, what blind spots, if any, in your reading would you two like to address in future episodes? Would you like me to go first? You want to take that one?
Why don't you go first?
I would say there's a couple blind spots for me as far as some pretty big name, prominent, important authors that I just haven't gotten to. So I haven't read any like Jane Austen or the Bronte sisters, like any women from that era. I definitely need to look into that. I've read a little bit of Joyce in high school, but I don't think I've read anything from him as an adult.
Yep.
And a more kind of mature reader, so I need to go there. I have a list somewhere, but those are a couple examples off the top of my head. And then Africa.
Yeah.
I'm doing this reading the world thing, and I'm not really, working on one region or another at a time. Just kind of going with the flow and whatever's catching my eye. But South Africa, Nigeria, I think that's it.
Yeah.
And there's 50 countries in Africa. So
yeah,
that's probably for me the biggest one.
Yeah. I would say similar to you, like a lot of quote unquote classic authors. I've read Dubliners, Joyce's short story collection, but I haven't read Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. Haven't read Ulysses. I would like to read those. I like the idea of reading Finnegan's Wake. I don't know if I ever will.
Yeah.
I know you and I have different opinions on most of that work.
Yeah.
Those works. I've never read any Melville.
Oh wow!
I definitely would like to read Moby Dick.
Okay, maybe that'll be the Life on Books year-long book is Moby Dick. That'd be a good one, actually.
Yeah.
I need to reread that badly.
Yeah. I haven't read any Faulkner. I don't think I've ever finished any Dickens.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I started a couple of them like before I was really like
Sure.
a reader.
Yeah.
And I don't think it was anything that I stopped like because I disliked them. I just stopped reading.
It happens sometimes. Yeah.
Austen, the Bronte sisters, things like that, and just continuing to chip away at works in translation. I don't really, I'm not following the same like read the world project that you are, but I do really enjoy works in translation.
Yeah.
And I think, I've been collecting them all. I would say, honestly, the biggest blind spot is reading the books I already own.
Oof.
It's
the cold, hard truth right there.
That's kind of where I'm at. I've not done a great job of not buying books in the last couple months. I've slowed down, as hard as it is to believe.
It's been over a month since I bought a book.
That's incredible.
I think it's the longest stretch I've gone since I started like a book talk or Bookstagram.
Yeah. But I did stop myself from Archipelago Books and Deep Vellum are both having sales right now.
Ooh.
And I pulled up both of their sites for about 3 minutes and I was like, I don't need this. I love both of these guys, but I have a heap of books from both of them that I can read. I don't need more books right now. I kind of have the books that I want to do the deeper dives that I want to go on. So that I would say that is probably my big blind spot right now. Like I've kind of been curating this personal library around authors and types of books that I'm interested in, and it's time to follow through.
Yeah,
and actually read them.
Yeah,
you know, a lot of the authors that I did just mention, like Faulkner and Austen, and the Bronte sisters, and Dickens to some extent, like I'm aware of their place in the overall literary canon, so to speak, but it's just not where my personal interests lie right now.
Right.
So like, I don't need to go out and fill my library with Faulkner books because I might get to them one day, or I feel like I should read them to be a well-rounded reader.
Yeah.
Like, I've got, enough books to last me the better part of a decade.
Yeah.
Like I want to be a well-rounded reader with the types of books that I like to engage with. And at least at this point in time, a lot of those classics, so to speak, aren't really the types of books that I like engaging with.
Yeah, I was going to say, both you and I are at a point now where we both have enough books that we could just straight up stop acquiring them and have lots to read.
Yeah.
So, what do you got? What do you got for the next question?
Most anticipated nonfiction for 2025.
Don't have any. There's, I mean, new releases. I'd have no idea really what's on the horizon. As a historically nonfiction dominant reader, which has been going the opposite direction the last 2 years, I have no idea what's coming out.
Yeah.
In 2025, I would like to read Endurance by Alfred Lansing, and I have a couple books on the Middle East that I'm really planning on getting to. Mm-hmm. But other than that, I don't. Who was that from? That was
from Matt Linton.
Yeah, sorry, Matt. Nothing too exciting there.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
Yeah. I don't know if I'll get around to reading it because it's pretty obvious. I'm much more of a fiction reader. I did talk a few weeks ago about The Devil's Chessboard. That's been on my radar for a while.
Yeah.
So I think if I get around to reading some nonfiction, it'll probably be that one.
And neither of us read a lot of new releases anyway.
Yeah.
So Red SI3 asks, what reading speed courses do you recommend? None. I don't believe in speed reading. I think if you're naturally just your natural comfortable pace is fast, good for you, great.
Yeah.
But I don't think you should intentionally try to increase your reading speed.
I have to force myself to slow down sometimes.
Yeah. Again, this is kind of like what we're just talking about with the reading too many books at once. Speed reading doesn't necessarily lend itself to being very immersed into a book. If you think about it, it's just part of the consumerist culture that we're living in. Not everything needs to be optimized. It's not about consuming the most of anything. We don't tell people to do this with any other medium. We don't watch our movies at 2x speed.
Right.
We don't tell people if you like fine cuisine to eat as fast as you can and eat as many meals as you can. We literally don't do this with any other art.
Yeah.
So why would we do this with our reading?
Agreed.
I will say there's an excellent YouTube video by the co-host of Catfish, the television show.
Interesting.
I forget his name. Apologize to that gentleman. He's got the kind of grayish, whitish hair. He's got a YouTube channel, and he did this excellent YouTube video about becoming a reader because he wasn't really reading. Mm-hmm. And he goes around and talks to a bunch of different professionals about how to build reading habits and how to read faster. And he literally goes and talks to the world's fastest reader.
Yep.
And that guy gives him some tips on how to read faster. But he's like, I use this to read 900-page pieces of legislation that need to be read in a week, before a decision's made, and I can help people digest it. He goes, I've given you these tips, but at the end of the day, just pick up a book
Right.
and just read it and enjoy it.
Yeah.
So that is that's my official answer on that. What do you got next?
Any plans to dig into poetry in the future?
I'm not going to say I don't want to,
Right.
but I'm also not going to say like, yes, I'm thinking about poetry quite a bit because I'm not.
Right.
It's a medium that, so my favorite poem is, I believe it's called Rendezvous with Death. That's how not into poetry I am. I can't remember the name of the one I like the most, by Alan Seeger. And it's a World War I poem. I actually read it at a poetry night many, many years ago. It's quite famous. If you read it or listen to it spoken aloud, you'll recognize it. And I was just reminded of the incredible Kipling poem, Boots, 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 Rising Up and Down, because it's featured in the trailer for the new movie 28 Years Later, which is a sequel to the fantastic film 28 Days Later. Those are like the two poems I can name off the top of my head because I know them. I like them.
Yeah.
They're both about war. So that tracks for me. But yeah, how about you?
I don't have any definite plans. It is a medium that I wish I enjoyed more. And I'm trying to, I wouldn't say force myself to enjoy, but like I've been trying to get into it more, especially with the Savage Detectives, like poetry and poets being such a central part of that work. I have gotten my hands on a few works of poets that are mentioned, and have read a couple of them. I'm slowly chipping away. It's tricky because I'm certainly not as astute of a reader when it comes to poetry compared to fiction. And sometimes I've said this last week, I believe, sometimes I'll pick up one of the collections and I'll read 4 poems, and one of them will really affect me, and the other 3 I feel nothing. So it's tough. Sometimes I like to. One thing I've started this year. Like I'll just have a handful of books that are kind of scattered around my apartment for grazing.
Yeah.
If I'm, you and I both have talked before about like how we like to watch the UFC and things like that. Sometimes if there's it just happens to be a book of poetry on the table in front of me, in front of the couch, if it's a commercial break, read a couple of poems.
Yeah.
So I like them for, for something like that. So I kind of am like have bookmarks in like 3 right now.
Yeah.
But I don't think I would like to read it more, but I read more poetry, but I don't think I'm going to become like a connoisseur or speak about it as much as I do about fiction in general.
Yeah.
So
this kind of parlays into the next question. Philium69 on Instagram asks, are there any short story collection recommendations that you have?
Borges.
So Andy's a big fan of Borges. I'm not a huge short story reader, but I've read some collections. I recently just finished At Night He Lifts Weights by Young-sook, which is a collection of short stories, which I thought were really cool.
Yep. I would recommend Borges. Clarice Lispector's collected short stories are great.
Yep.
This year I also read Waiting for the Fear by
the Turkish author.
Yeah, Oguz Atay.
Yep.
It's a Turkish author. That was great. The one I mentioned earlier, Practical Guide to Levitation. Those were really good. I would definitely recommend The Taker and Other Stories by Rubern Fonseca. That is from our friends at Open Letter.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I should especially shout that out. That was great. Gas has some really great short work.
Yep. In the heart of the country, right?
Yep. And the novella, it's like 90 pages, so it's more of a novella. But the story, The Peterson Kid, in that collection is like one of my favorite pieces of short fiction.
Cool.
So that's great. Yeah. There's there's lots of good short story collections out there, but I think Borges would be like at the top of my list. If you're looking for something more novella length, The Adventures and Misadventures of Maqroll.
Yep.
Because those are all about 100 pages each, and there's 7 of them. So
nice. All right. What do you have for the next question?
A book that you didn't think you'd like, and why? And why did you end up loving it?
Infinite Jest. I didn't think I would like it because I had started to read it previously and was kind of like, eh. And also, you and I have some tastes that overlap, but we also have some very different tastes.
Yeah.
And I thought that book might fall into that category.
Yeah.
But it's just a good enough book that it didn't matter, I guess.
Yeah. I don't really have a great answer to that because I don't pick up a book if I don't think I'm going to like it.
Sure.
But one book that I ended up liking, I thought I would like, and I ended up liking more than I did, was The Mystery Doc by Matthew McIntosh. I talked about that one a while back when I had read it. It's 1,600 pages, but it's not full of text. There's large chunks where the pages are blank, or there's just like a still image or a single word,
right?
Something like that. It just, to me, was a very kind of interesting take on post 9/11 early internet America.
Yeah.
And similar to what I kind of said this jokingly when I was talking about The Q by Sorokin, but I think it sort of applies to The Mystery Doc. Like, I'm not sure if it is dumb or brilliant.
Right.
I think it totally depends on the reader.
Yeah.
I remember I put this in my review that I posted on Instagram, and I said it on the show when I was talking about reading it, that, like, you know, I would go, and depending on what the sections were, like if it was something where it was just like, you know, blank pages or still images or just a single word on each page or something like that, like I'd read it on my lunch break and in half an hour, almost mindlessly flip through 200 something pages.
Right.
And I'm still like not convinced that that's not the point.
Right.
Like, I think I remember saying, like, it's almost like pre-doom scrolling.
Yeah.
In a book form. And like, I think that's kind of the point. Just this influx of information that may or may not be meaningless, and it's up to the person taking in that information to decide.
Yeah.
So I expected to like it, but not anywhere as much as I did. So
yeah. I'd also add Yellowface to that list. I had read Babel. It's kind of like whatever. It's good, but whatever. You know, a book I'm not going to reread. Definitely not really the right reader that was in mind when that book was written, probably. But Yellowface got a lot of hype, and the synopsis sounded interesting to me, but I was like, you know, sometimes when books are overhyped, you just kind of like, no, it's not going to be good. But I loved it. So
yeah.
Okay. Brian Swift Photography on Instagram asks, has any book made you want to learn more about a subject or a character? Every book I've ever read.
Yeah.
I guess I'll give a recent example. So I'm currently reading Insurrecto by Gina Apostle, and that book is loosely about the U.S. occupation of the Philippines, which is something a lot of people don't know happened. And I learned about this a little bit from How to Hide an Empire by Daniel Imhovar, which I read 2 years ago. But this book is making me want to learn more about it. But I mean, that's, for me, that happens so frequently.
Yeah, with like everything.
Yeah.
Like, It's happening to me right now with the Savage Detectives. Like I was like, oh, all these poets come up. I want to read all these poets. I'm probably not going to understand a lick of what I read, but maybe it'll influence and enhance my understanding of the Savage Detectives.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's pretty much everything.
All right. What do you get next?
All right. Benjamin Heels would like to know if there are any specific books we're planning to read in 2025 or if we're just going to wing it.
Yes. And I got a couple questions of that nature as well. But I think our next episode should be our reading plans for 2025. So tune in, subscribe.
Should we? Because we did that last year and things went sideways for both of us.
Yeah, whatever. It's something to talk about. So we'll come back to that.
Yeah. Okay.
Cerdinus Books on Instagram asks, have you read any Laszlo Krasnohorkai? If so, what do you think? I have not. You have read quite a bit.
Yeah, I love Krasnohorkai's work. I think, yeah, I mean, it's awesome. You should read it if you're interested. I would recommend starting with Satan Tango. Some people start with The Melancholy of Resistance. I think that's a fine starting place too. Satan Tango was published first in the original Hungarian. Melancholy of Resistance was his first book to be published in English. So I realistically, I mean, I did enjoy going chronologically with Satan Tango, Melancholy, War and War, Baron Venkheim's Homecoming, because Krasnohorkai himself has said that they're kind of like almost like a quartet. So for me, it felt like it made sense to read them chronologically. I don't think you're certainly not going to miss anything narratively if you read them out of order.
Yeah.
But I would pick one of those two, Satan Tango or Melancholy of Resistance, if you're looking to start getting into his work.
Gotcha.
So,
I
got one more.
Oh, okay.
Well, I think we can kind of put this one to the side since we're going to ultimately do another episode on this topic. But Blather Bruggs, how does the tunnel compare with Omensetter's Luck? I think we'll probably get into that deeper when we get around to when we have both finished the tunnel and do that episode. But
yeah,
do you have any sentiments you want to share right now?
Yeah, I'll just say that it's not as hard of a read as I thought it was going to be, and it's more my style than Omensetter's Luck. Just the topic, the subject matter is more interesting to me. So
yeah,
that's what I'll say about it right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is all I got.
Okay.
Yeehaw.
Don Smith 75 said, have you watched the Netflix adaptation of 100 Years of Solitude? I haven't watched it yet. Have you?
I have not.
Yeah. We'll probably do a whole episode about that maybe, depending on what it's like after we watch it. That'll be interesting because that's the type of book that a lot of people have said can't be adapted.
Right.
So we'll see what happens.
I started reading a review of the Netflix adaptation the other day, and I didn't think the author of that review said anything. So it's just kind of like, just tell me if this might be worth watching.
They didn't give an indication, good or bad, really?
Yeah.
Oh, terrible review then.
Yeah, I wasn't reading super closely either, so I don't want to totally diss the reviewer. But I was like, what's the point?
Yeah.
Review it.
Have you read any Indian English literature or translated anything from India? So I've read a couple books from Jiddu Krishnamurti, which is nonfiction. It's philosophy. I have not read any literature by an Indian author yet, but I do have a couple books on my shelf. I have The White Tiger by Andiga, and I have Samskara by U.R. Ananthmurthy, I think his name is. It's a NYRB edition classic.
Nice. I have only read White Tiger. That's the only book from India I've read, or an Indian author. To my knowledge, I don't have any other books on my shelf unread from Indian authors.
Yeah.
I've heard about one that the publisher and other stories, put out earlier this year. Funeral Nights by Kinfam Singh Nong Kinra. You try to pronounce that.
All right, Funeral Nights by Kinfam Singh Non Kinrid. Kinra? I don't know.
Yeah.
White guys trying to pronounce Indian names, never a good combo.
Yeah. So that's an Indian work of fiction. It sounded very interesting. I haven't pulled the trigger on it. So I don't know if anyone out there listening or if anyone from And Other Stories is listening and wants to hook me up with a copy.
There you go.
Send me a message. I'll read it.
Escrito de Juan Bautista asks, what's your favorite modern novel?
My favorite modern novel. Probably a Bennett Circuity or a Naked Singularity. Actually a handful of the books that I listed today in my top 10 were from the 21st century.
Yeah.
But I think those two take the cake as far as like my absolute favorites.
Yeah. I guess it really depends on what your definition of modern is.
Let's say this century.
Okay. So, I mean, yeah, but we're 25 years in. So, I don't know. I'd have to think about it. Some of the books on this list, were written in that time. Tree of Smoke,
Yep.
Human Act, The Anarchist Who Shared My Name.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll go with those. That'll be my cop-out answer. Colleen Ford White asks, what is your favorite book cover and why?
Ooh.
I'm a big fan of Inherent Vice by Thomas Pynchon.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a really cool neon noir retro look to
Right
it.
outside the shack.
Yeah.
Got the PT or not the PT Cruiser.
It's it's some type of wagon.
Yeah.
Like station wagon.
Yeah.
I'd have to go look a little more closely to see if it's a specific model. But I will also say it's in this pile right here. This particular edition from Canongate of The Tartar Steppe by Dino Buzzati is fantastic. So the book is about this guy who's this soldier who's stationed at this remote fort in the mountains.
Yeah.
And so on this cover, you've got the fort up there in the mountains, and then you see him all the way down there with his horse,
path. Yeah.
the windy path,
That's
and the
cool.
shadow. And I just love like the color choice, the pink and the kind of white contrast really well.
Yeah.
And then another book that comes to mind is Winter in Sokcho by Elisa
That's a
Dusepin.
great cover.
Yeah, with that bubblegum pink and the
Yeah.
kind of like Asian style like font.
Yep.
That's a good one.
Yeah. I've got, plenty. I mean, talked before about Baron Venkheim's Homecoming.
Mm-hmm.
That cover's great. I really like the cover of the Dalkey edition of the Recognitions.
Mm-hmm.
It's got it's a picture. It's an image of Gaddis, kind of looking at like some art, probably from like a period of time where he was traveling, in like the Spain and Portugal, that kind of area. Looking at art, that's very cool. There's a lot of NYRB ones that are great. Some of the Corona Samizdat covers are really cool too.
Yeah.
There's one of them. It's by Zach Tanner, Margie and the Atomic Brain. I haven't read it yet, but the cover is awesome.
Nice.
Called The Cactus Boots is a great cover. That one's really cool. The Concentric Circles of a Bennett Circuity are really cool. The Dalkey edition of The Tunnel is really cool.
Yeah, the black one.
Yeah.
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 The green one, the light coming through the tunnel looks like a pat of butter to me.
That's funny.
I can never not see that.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many good covers out there.
Yeah. Interior Odyssey asks, what is a book that makes you hopeful or brings you hope? One that told you it will be okay. I don't read books like that.
Yeah, right.
So pass. I don't know if any come to mind for you.
Yeah, I don't really read a lot of books that are hopeful. I'll shout out a couple. I'm going to spin the question a little bit. Books that I've read that give me hope that good literature will continue and we're not going to get a bunch of watered down mainstream crap that's the same book released every 6 months.
Yeah.
A Bended Circuity, A Naked Singularity, Call of the Cactus Boots, The Garden, A Pastoral, Wailing Madness, Shame and Death. So much of what like Corona Samizdat is putting out. It wasn't necessarily for me, but a book like Novel Explosives, that was really unique and it was fun for a while for me, and I just kind of it fizzled out. But Krasnohorkai is still publishing things.
Yeah,
Open Letter is still putting out great books.
Yep.
Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff like that just gives me hope for the future of literature.
Cool. So Thesaurus Kim asked, do you plan your plot outlines for every story real, or do you just wing it? This is probably more for me.
Yeah.
I used to write scripts for my videos, and then I moved to bullet points, and now I just wing it.
Yeah.
Because I just have gotten so used to doing it over and over and over again. I kind of know what I want to say and how I want to say it.
Yep.
Thesaurus Kim asked, any other hobbies beside reading?
Jiu-jitsu and lifting weights. Pretty much it.
Yeah, I ride motorcycles. I play guitar. I kind of write every once in a while. I used to be really into lifting weights before I was medically barred from doing so. Yep. Same with jiu-jitsu. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, I'm a pretty boring guy, I think.
You're a cool guy, Andy.
Oh, thanks, Tony.
Which is a great parlay into this next question, also from Thesaurus Kim. They have a lot of questions. Shouldn't assume that that's a woman. Do your friends like to read and have the same tastes? Excluding each other, no.
I actually have one friend that I don't think he is into it with the same fervor that you and I are.
Yeah.
But I think he's picked up a lot of recommendations from me. Actually, no, he has, because he texted me about it. So,
oh, cool. That's cool.
Shout out to Mike. Mike recently had his first kid.
Oh, what up, Mike?
Wife, Olivia.
Less
Congratulations
to
them.
Reading coming from Mike soon here. Yeah, no, I don't really have a lot of friends that read, and if they do, they don't read what I read. Books you feel are overrated, overhyped. I don't want to do that one. Sorry. Faster to Juno. This is an interesting question from Brian Swift Photography. If you get a book recommendation, can you always find the book? No, not always. We're living in a world where I don't think people truly appreciate how easy it is to actually get books.
Right.
This is something that the internet actually had a huge impact on. And if you talk to a lot of book collectors, they'll tell you that it really became less fun once all these online databases came into existence, because before you would have to go to estate sales and indie bookstores and used bookstores and just hope that something was there that you wanted that was going to complete your collection, or that you've been on the lookout, or was a hidden gem.
Yeah.
Now you can literally go on there, and like I think The Tunnel by William Gass is a great example. It's currently out of print. There's a new edition coming out, but the book's got a little bit of hype around it online, and people are like, "Oh, I can't find a copy." It's like, well, no, you can. You just have to pay $50 for it, or more.
Right.
And if you think about it, like in the past, before the internet, like if we were in this situation, you literally would not be able to get that book.
Right.
You would have to go to a bunch of places before you might stumble across
right.
a
and hope
copy.
they have it. Yeah.
And hope
I
it's in
think
good
that's
condition.
something like we were talking earlier about like how we both have accumulated such immense libraries, and
Yeah.
we realistically could just go without buying books for years,
Yeah.
and still have plenty to read. And I have said this in the past before. Like I think one of my reading goals for the future is to just focus on the books that I actually have.
Yeah.
And I'm not foolish enough to say I'm going to stop buying books. But I think I'm going to do my best to stop buying them online, because one, it's so much more fun when you stumble upon a book in a bookstore.
Yep.
Even if you're not like intentionally looking for it. But if it's like one you've heard of before and you see it there, or you're like, oh, this seems like an interesting title. What's it about? And holy shit, sounds like it's going to be a great book for me. Or it is one you've been looking for forever.
Yeah.
But also, like, I think it's so easy, and I fall in this trap all the time. Like, if I'm, really bored at work or sitting at home or whatever, like, I'm just going to pull up the Goodreads app and then go to Abe Books and see, like, oh, what should I buy today?
Right.
And, like, that I want to get away from.
Yeah.
I know myself enough, and I know, from what I know about, my time in the fitness industry of trying to be like overly restrictive, it just ends up having negative effects. Like,
Yeah.
I know I'm not going to just outright stop buying books, but I think I just got to stop with the incessant mindless online orders.
Yeah, I agree. Sometimes, occasionally, somebody will recommend me a book there's no English translation of.
Yeah.
That's really the only time I find it hard to find a book. But I agree, like, it's so much more fun to stumble upon something in a store than it is to just add it to the cart online and shows up 3 days later.
It also depends on who recommends the book. I know it's not really the question, but like,
Yeah, for sure. 11th volume asked, if you had to choose one book to represent you as who you are as a reader, what would it be?
Oh, wow. That's a good question.
Catch-22, Joseph Heller.
Yeah.
That is still my favorite book. I love everything about it. I love any book that's kind of similar in tone or theme to that book. So I'd say probably that.
Yeah, I guess I think just because of the trajectory it sent me on and how central it is to my reading life, and other parts of my life in general, I'd probably have to say Gravity's Rainbow.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a boring answer given that I've talked about it so much and how it's not boring, but repetitive. It's
I think we're 2.5 hours in. This is the first GR reference, maybe.
Maybe.
I don't think we've talked about it so far.
Wow.
Please recommend books like The Da Vinci Code. Can't. Sorry. Read it. It was fine when I was 20 or whatever.
Yeah, I don't have a
those
clue.
aren't really our types of books. Bob Whitkin asks, what's the first memorable Jesus Christ, I can't talk today. What's the first memorable book you read?
Probably East of Eden for me. If you want to talk about more like recent, as I have become
Like as an adult.
adult, like as a seasoned reader, I would say 100 Years of Solitude.
Mm-hmm.
But if you go back to, I've talked about this before, I read East of Eden the summer going into my senior year of high school as an assigned reading. And I pretty much up until my senior year, like I always read everything that was assigned in school. But most of the time I just kind of felt, okay, whatever.
Yeah,
Like it was assigned reading. I did it. Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
But I remember East of Eden being the first book that I read as an assignment that I was really immersed in.
Yeah.
There might have been some others that I read prior to that, but they don't really stick as much. Yeah, I would say probably that as the first one that really like stuck with me. And again, if you want to go with more like recent history, 100 Years of Solitude.
Yeah. I would say After the First Death by Robert Cormier. He's a young adult author who I read a lot of when I was a young adult. and quite a few of his books are memorable. The Chocolate War is excellent. Tunes for Bears to Dance to is excellent. But After the First Death was always my favorite. I've read it multiple times. I've not read it as a legit adult, like as a mature reader here, but I will. I was thinking about doing it this year. I just didn't get around to it, so I'll probably do it this coming year. But if I remember correctly, I think the story will hold up.
Yeah.
As an adult reader. So
Great.
okay. More MMA content, and that's from Satchel Koenig. Probably not, because I am not going to be watching the UFC anymore. I'm just sick of the BS politics, rolling out oligarchs at their events and having everybody simp over them is just pathetic and disgusting. And I realize that it especially that organization, I feel like, is getting less about the martial arts and more about the gimmick of the show.
Yeah.
And that's not why I watch it. I have very little in common with your average UFC fan, intellectually and philosophically. So I'm a big fan of high-level martial arts, grappling, kickboxing, but maybe I'll just go watch another organization. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if I will outright stop watching it like you have. I think we do share similar feelings. I'm certainly going to probably stop watching as frequently as I do.
Yeah.
I think, I've talked about this with other friends before. Like I had kind of gone from a casual to a more consistent fan during COVID when it was on, because they were like one of the first sports that were back.
Yeah.
And they were on so frequently, and they kind of kept up that frequency since. And I've kind of finally come around to, like, I don't need to watch every Saturday night.
Yeah.
Like, I if there's fights or events that I'm interested in, I'll probably still watch them.
Yeah.
But, there are plenty of times where, like, I'll be like, oh, it's Saturday night, like, I'm going to watch fights, and then I'm just, like, playing on my phone the whole time or not really paying attention to the fights. Like,
yeah.
There's other things I could be doing. Could be reading.
Could be reading.
Could be doing anything with my life. Could be studying my own jiu-jitsu.
I'm sorry, I can't make out this username. I need glasses. They asked, have you read A Farewell to Arms by Hemingway? If yes, share your thoughts. And if no, do read it. Yes, I've read it. Of the limited Hemingway I've read, it's my favorite Hemingway. Have you read it? If you did, apparently didn't make much of an impression.
No, I think I read The Sun Also Rises.
Yeah, I don't like that book at all.
That's the one you've said is kind of like Seinfeld in the...
It's Seinfeld without the comedy, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the 1920s.
I think I've read part of A Farewell to Arms, and it might have been before I was like a big reader.
Yeah.
And I stopped. I think part of it, if I'm remembering correctly, it was before I had figured out to just skip the introduction.
Yeah. And it spoiled it for you.
It spoiled something for me, and I was not invested enough that knowing what happened, like I could overlook knowing what happened.
Yeah.
So I kind of just was like,
I'm out.
Yeah. And I don't remember I don't think I was enjoying it all that much. Again, it was before I was like a seasoned reader. So
yeah,
maybe I would have more of an appreciation for it now. So I don't want to say I disliked it or anything like that. It was so long ago. So
this is just a funny tangent, but when I made that post about what made you follow me, somebody commented and said, oh, I loved your videos until you said that you didn't like The Sun Also Rises. Then I unfollowed you. Like, you clearly didn't understand that book. And I was just like, okay, first of all, I haven't said anything about The Sun Also Rises in months.
Yeah.
So, like, you're still here. You know what I mean? Maybe it just popped up in your feed. I don't know. But, like, kind of weird. Also, like just one book that we disagreed on. That's why
That's all it takes.
I was like, okay, man, do what you got to do. It just made me laugh. Okay. Brody on Rye asks, if you could only keep one book from your existing collection, which book would it be besides Gravity's Rainbow?
Oh, that is a compelling question.
I know what it would be for me.
All right, you go ahead, because I have a few choices, but I'm not sure.
Mine would be Mr. Weightlifting by Richard Bach, which is the biography of Norb Szymanski. It's a special edition. It's signed. It's a great book about a super cool guy.
That's cool.
So Norb Szymanski is, in my opinion, one of the greatest weightlifters of all time. Definitely the greatest American weightlifter of all time. Nobody knows who he is.
Yeah.
Nobody talks about him. Even people who compete in weightlifting today probably don't know who Norb Szymanski is, because just a brief history lesson for everybody here. Weightlifting was one of the first modern Olympic sports in 1896, and the events changed over the first few Olympics. And right around the 1920s is when it kind of became more formalized with weight classes, and there was 3 events. It was the snatch, the clean and jerk, and the clean and press. And this dude won 4 Olympic medals. So he won medals at 4 different Olympic events, because they only give 1 medal. It's not like swimming where you get medals for every event. Yeah. And it was over a 5 Olympiad period.
Wow.
Right. Not to mention his first Olympics that he medaled at, he, I think, had just gotten back from fighting Nazis in World War II.
Wow.
And he had to quit his job to go compete because his boss wouldn't give him the time off to go to the Olympics. And over the years, the techniques involved in weightlifting changed quite a bit. They used to do the split snatch and the split clean. We found out that squatting under the bar was much more efficient rather than splitting the legs like a lunge. And he continued with the split style because that's how he had trained his whole career. And he was still competitive doing that. Just a total badass. It's a great biography. It's well written. The guy was so cool. But, you know, he was pre-50s, really.
Yeah.
So everyone's just forgotten about him. And he was competing primarily in the pre-steroid era. So if you look at some of the records now compared to then, they don't seem that impressive. I mean, they're still big weights, but what these steroid monsters are doing now is insane.
Yeah.
Super physiologic. We have better training methods, better nutrition under science, and all this stuff. So really freaking cool book. If you can't find a copy of it, let me know. I do have a PDF file of it, and the author has given me the okay to share it with people.
Cool.
Because it's out of print. And
yeah. I think if we're talking about like books that have a lot of value, I would say probably my signed first edition of JR.
Oh, nice.
Got to save that one.
Yep.
But I mean, in terms of like rereadability, something I would like want to continue to go back to. I mean, I can't pick just one, which I know is the question, but you know, I mean, there's Infinite Jest, the Maqroll novellas, Borges. Borges is quite literally, in my opinion, the Desert Island book.
Nice.
Like, you know, there's just so much there. There's so much to go back to. I mean, maybe even JR. I don't think I could pick just one. Yeah, I don't know. Robert S. Stickley sent me a signed manuscript of A Bended Circuity.
Nice.
I might, you know, again, if we're talking about saving a book in a, God forbid, catastrophic event, that's probably coming with me. But yeah, I couldn't pick just one. That's a good question, Brody. Why would you make me do that?
Aaron Zimmer asks, what are the future plans for the YouTube channel? Hope y'all had a good year. Thank you. You as well. I mean, our plans, I think, are just to continue doing what we're doing. I would like to get back to getting some guests on the show more frequently.
Yep.
And I would like to pivot towards doing more video essays. I keep saying I'm going to do it, but they're a lot of work. So just posting more of those, I guess.
Yeah, I think it would be great to have more guests on. I know it's tough because of our own reading schedules, and we kind of have been doing this with the book club, but I do like when we do episodes on like a single book.
Yeah.
So obviously it helps having the book club because that kind of forces us to do it.
Yeah.
But I think even if we find some that aren't for the book club, that would be fun. Yeah, that's pretty much, I think, all I got. I know I mentioned this to you recently. We're coming up on 50 episodes, so
Right.
we got to do something cool for that.
Yeah.
But TBD.
Yeah. When are you guys going to set aside 4 hours and read True Grit? So True Grit was a book I had mentioned when I posted on social media asking for recommendations on Westerns.
Yep.
And our friend Ed Park, the author of Same Bed, Different Dreams, among other things.
Among personal days
Personal
and
Days
his upcoming collection of short stories, The Oral History of Atlantis.
Yeah. He was a big proponent of True Grit by Charles Portis. Yeah, I'll probably read that in 2025. Was that one of the books we voted on for the book club?
I don't believe so.
Anyway, we read Lonesome Dove for the book club this past year, which is probably one of, if not the most famous Western, which was good.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll probably read True Grit. I'm not really a Westerns guy, but that and Warlock by Oakley Hall are definitely on my radar.
Yep.
When are you going to read True Grit, Andy?
Right after someone sends me a copy of it, because I don't have it. As we talked about 40 minutes ago on our plans for 2025, I am trying to drastically reduce, not trying, I am going to drastically reduce the number of books that I buy.
Yep.
So I am interested in that, but unfortunately not interested enough to go out and buy it right now.
So if you want to,
if you want me
gift
to,
him the book,
if you want me to read True Grit, send me a DM, Metafictional Meathead on Instagram, and I will give you my mailing address.
and that question came from Andy Ward, so it would be from one Andy to another.
Yeah.
If he sends you the book. Aaron Zimmer asks, what are the future plans for the YouTube channel? Hope y'all had a good year. Thank you, Aaron. We did have a good year. Andy, any particular plans for this YouTube channel?
I mean, I guess I don't really have any particular plans for the channel because I know that you, obviously we do the podcast.
Yeah.
The podcast is hosted on the channel, but you do a lot more of your own personal content creation through it.
Yeah.
I guess I'll kind of rehash what I just finished saying on the previous episode we recorded. I am really looking forward to doing more podcast episodes in general.
Yep.
But I also hope we can find the time and can kind of merge our mood reading squirrel brains to read books, the same book, books by the same author, or books with similar enough themes
Yeah.
that we can do more like discussion and or analysis
Yeah.
episodes. Because it's been a lot of fun doing that with the book club. I think we've got some exciting plans for the book club coming up that will lend to more discussion-based episodes.
Yeah.
But that's something I would like to do more of in the future, which, again, you and I have very sporadic reading habits. We do have similar taste in books, but
Yeah.
unfortunately our habits and tastes don't always align for us to do
Right.
discussion-based podcasts. So
About particular works.
about particular books or authors or countries. But
Yeah.
I would like to do more of that in the future.
Yeah, I would agree with all that. I would like to have more guests on again.
Definitely more guests.
Kind of got away from that a little bit. It's just tough logistically. We're here in New Hampshire. Not a lot of people are local.
Yeah.
So if you're in a different time zone, there's that issue of scheduling, and then there's some technological, not constraints, but considerations that
Yeah.
add stress and the whole thing. So,
Yeah.
as far as the YouTube channel itself, I'm actually glad we didn't field this question last week because there was a pretty major update this week. I'm actually not sure when this was rolled out for me, but YouTube has now officially upped the limit for YouTube Shorts from 60 seconds up to 3 minutes.
Oh, damn.
And this is huge because I had not really been posting any of my short form content to YouTube because it's hard to do a recap in 60 seconds of a book.
Right.
So it's even hard to keep it to 90 seconds for Instagram. Technically, you can post a reel that's longer, but they literally will give you a message that's saying, hey, we're not going to like show this to new audiences, like in the Discover page or whatever it's called. It's like, great. So I was already really struggling to trim things down to 90 seconds or less. And I just didn't want to have to cut a second version of every video I make for the 60 seconds.
Yeah.
Sometimes it just wasn't even doable. The way I said things, it just wouldn't make sense if I cut certain parts out.
Right.
So YouTube, unfortunately, was not getting really much of my short form content. So that 3 minute mark will alleviate that. So now you will start to see all of the stuff that I post on Instagram and TikTok also being posted to YouTube, which I think is important because in our Patreon book club, a lot of people don't even have Instagram or TikTok. They only use YouTube.
Wow.
So there is still a contingency of readers that are only doing BookTube. So it's going to bring more content to them, which is great. Of course, TikTok might be going away on January 19th. That's yet to be fully determined, but that's a possibility. So I think bringing that stuff to YouTube, and that's exactly why they did it.
Right.
They realized like, hey, if we don't up this to 3 minutes, everyone's just going to go to Instagram instead of us.
Right.
So they wanted to capture some of that traffic if people do end up losing TikTok. And then as far as like the, I guess what I would call at this point, medium format. So we have the podcast that's long, there's short form stuff that's the vertical. I've been saying that I want to do more of these like medium format essays and things of that nature, but I've yet to really figure out what I want to do and what the audiences want to see. And I feel like BookTube, like the classic BookTube, really peaked probably maybe even like 10 years ago now. And that kind of like really popular, I'm a book reviewer, here's a video, 1 10-minute video about a book. I feel like that's almost non-existent now.
Yeah.
There's pretty big channels with large followings that post a single book review in like a 5 or 10-minute video, and it's getting like 5,000 views, 8,000 views, which is not great if you want to really grow your channel, and especially if you want to do more like in-depth and even maybe some like more cinematic production around the video, so it's not just me sitting there talking for 5 to 10 minutes. It's just a lot of work to not get a whole lot of results out of it. So obviously, you know, our podcast episodes only are averaging, I would say 3,000 to 5,000 views per episode at this point, which is not a ton. However, the production is relatively simple.
Right. We're
just sitting down and talking. There's a little bit of editing that goes on behind the scenes. It's easy for me to outsource if I need to do that. There's also like getting 5,000 views on an hour-long piece of content is much more impactful than getting 5,000 views on a 10-minute piece of content.
Right.
So, yeah, still trying to figure out that aspect. If anybody has any opinions, tips, whatever on that, I would love to hear your feedback. I do have a couple concepts in mind that I think will perform well, but I just haven't quite figured it out yet. So, okay, on to our next question. Let's see. I know we answered some of these last week. Frankie Draws on Instagram asks, thoughts on Kindle?
I don't like to read on e-readers. I just find I don't engage as well with the work. I like the tactile feel of a book in my hand.
Yeah.
I've talked about it before. One of the great pleasures of reading for me is kind of removing myself from external stimuli and
Electronics.
right. Obviously it's a little bit different on a Kindle or an e-reader. Like I'm not gonna, I can't, it's been a while since I've used one, but I'm pretty sure you can't just switch and open up Instagram and other things.
Yeah. There's really nothing else on it.
As easily distracted, but it's still kind of the same thing for me. Like I don't find it as engaging. I like holding books.
Yeah.
I like having a library full of books.
Yeah.
If you don't have the space to keep a bunch of books at wherever you live, or you prefer the portability of being able to bring a Kindle around with you, if you find that as an engaging medium, then use a Kindle. Don't listen to me.
Yeah.
I don't have any qualms against it.
Right.
I've obviously, I've kind of rallied against audiobooks in the past.
Yeah.
I don't feel all that strongly about a Kindle.
Yeah.
If that's how you like to read, use a Kindle. It's not for me, but
I think it's important for people to engage with books in whichever way is best for them, whether that is an audiobook, which is certainly not my preference, or it's a physical book, or it's an ebook, or e-reader. I've read one book on a Kindle, so I have one. I read Musashi on the Kindle because the physical copy of it is just massive. It's this giant hardcover, which I don't really like reading anyway. The font is incredibly small. The print is very small. So it's just hard for me to read. Even with reading glasses, it was still I'd rather just read this on an e-reader.
Yeah.
And certainly much easier to hold. I don't mind it, but it's not my first preference.
Right.
The only thing I'll add to this, and this is a bit of I'll put on my tinfoil hat for this one.
Oh, damn.
Is there is something to be said about with a physical book, it is what it is. If you bought a book in 1970, it still says the same thing inside of it as it does in 2025, sitting on your shelf. There has been talk about, I think Roald Dahl was one that got mentioned recently, of redacting some of the language in his books, or and technically speaking, somebody could edit a file and publish it an e-file that's, this is what this book says, and as the physical copies of something that's out of print maybe perhaps get harder to acquire, we could fundamentally change what we think was originally written. And again, it's a little conspiratorial, but it is something to think about. So just take that with a grain of salt. I don't think it's a major concern.
Right.
It's just food for thought, I guess. More of a philosophical approach to that question.
Yeah.
I don't know. Did we do this one? Inspired Void asks, reading habits you want to leave in 2024.
I feel like we probably did.
Yeah. All right, we'll skip that.
Even if we didn't, I think we can both. It's a safe assumption. The only habit we'll probably really want to leave behind is quantitative.
Yeah, which I've already done.
We've talked about at length. So good question, but
yeah.
Not much else to say on the topic.
Rasala Bookshop asks, how do you... Hey, guess what, Haga? It's podcast time. Yeah.
We did get through one whole episode without an interruption, so
true.
It was only a matter of time.
Yeah. Okay. Rasala Bookshop on Instagram asks, how do you recommend reading Dostoevsky? I don't. That's I'm just not a fan of the writing.
Yeah.
I'm just not. Great themes, topics, influential writer. Read it if you want, but I'm not the person to ask that question to.
Yeah. I don't know. Just read Dostoevsky.
Right.
This is, and I don't mean this to come off as insulting, but sometimes, I'm sure you run into this. I'll get messages from people how should I start reading Thomas Pynchon or Dostoevsky or Volman or whoever? and certainly, in some cases with like an author like Pynchon, like maybe to get the most out of a work like Gravity's Rainbow, it would behoove you to have some of his writing under your belt, so you're a little bit better prepared for it.
Yeah.
But like also, if you're interested in a book or a particular author, like, and we'll take Dostoevsky for example. If Notes from Underground or Crime and Punishment are the only books that you have, or the only books that you have easy access to, and you're really interested in reading that particular author, just read them.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah.
I think sometimes people like overthink this idea of like being super prepared for reading certain authors.
Yeah.
And I remember talking about this when we kind of tried to attempt a Gravity's Rainbow group read.
Yeah.
Like, to some extent with a book like that, like the complexity and the lack of total understanding, like, is the point.
Right.
If you put off reading Gravity's Rainbow until you read everything that there is to read to prepare for Gravity's Rainbow, you might never read it.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
there's so much depth to that novel. I would,
There's literary criticisms, there's companions,
Right.
there's, yeah.
right. There's works of fiction and poetry that influenced parts of it.
Right.
I would kind of recommend almost kind of working backwards.
Yeah.
Like, and I can't really speak to Dostoevsky on this, but like with an author like Pynchon, read Gravity's Rainbow. And if there's a certain parts of that book that really interest you, that you want to get more of the context, then you can go back.
Yeah.
I think I've talked about it before. Like Rilke comes up a lot in Gravity's Rainbow. Excuse me, and the Dunio elegies and sonnets to Orpheus. Like,
Yeah.
if you read Gravity's Rainbow and you find those influences really interesting, then go back and read Rilke.
Yeah.
And then maybe you'll get some appreciation for Rilke. Maybe you really enjoy that. Maybe you won't.
Yeah.
And then go back and read Gravity's Rainbow, or go back and read those sections.
Yeah.
And see how your appreciation and understanding for them has changed. So with certain authors, there's probably a case that could be made for like how they have a better starting point than others. But also, like, it depends on what you have access to.
Yeah.
And I don't think that you should put off reading an author that you're really interested in because you haven't read the prerequisite that
Right.
someone mentioned in a comment on Instagram or Reddit. Like, maybe it'll help your understanding.
Yeah.
It probably will. But also, will it add that much tangible appreciation and understanding that you shouldn't just start with the book that you have in front of you and that you're excited to read?
Yeah. I agree. I do think that some people overthink it. And it makes a little bit more sense with a complex and lauded author like a Pynchon or a Dostoevsky.
Yeah.
But ultimately, there's very few books, in my opinion, that you couldn't just pick up and start reading.
Yeah. I'll use like Bolano as an example because I talked about it in the last episode. Like, I really want to read 2666, but I have a lot of his shorter works that I'd like to read first to kind of get a better appreciation and idea of the, because his works all seem to be very interconnected.
Yeah.
And kind of have Easter eggs that connect them all throughout. Like, I would like to get a better appreciation of his kind of literary universe.
Yeah.
But
You could have just picked up
I could have just
2666,
picked up
yeah.
2666
Yeah.
and read it.
Yeah.
And I think if,
A general good kind of practice in these situations is pick the author's most famous work
Yeah.
because there's going to be the most conversation around that. So there's going to be more people to discuss it with, or forums that you can go back through and read, or
Right.
guides that might help if you stumble along the way, or pick the author's shortest work
Right.
because it's the least intimidating. Obviously, short novels can sometimes be very complex and difficult to read, but at least that difficulty is not prolonged over 700 pages.
Right.
So in the case of Dostoevsky, I would say his most popular work is probably Crime and Punishment.
Yeah.
And I would say one of his kind of shorter, more well-known books is Notes from Underground.
Yeah.
So start with one of those two. You might want to do a little bit of research on the preferable translations.
Right.
But again, I'm not the person to ask about that.
Right.
So
I think for me, it comes back to like we've said before, we've talked about like DNFing books.
yeah.
That life is too short to read books you're not interested in.
Yeah.
I think the flip side of that, life is too short to put off books that you are interested in.
Correct.
You know?
That's a great way of putting it. All right.
Oh boy.
Another person named Andy BDQ asked, what is a book you own that you wish you read in 2024 but weren't able to get to? Well, I have about 500 unread books over there. For sure, I would say Matterhorn. I definitely thought I was going to read this one this year and did not get to it. There's a few more that were really like catching my eye, but I can't think of them off the top of my head.
Yeah, I mean, I think I still have the like 24 for 24 reading list I made.
Oh, yeah. That's always a fun exercise, right?
Yeah.
I thought it would be funny when we were just recording the plans for 2025 episode. We should have looked at the episode we did not too long ago about the 5 books we want to read before the end of the year.
Oh, yeah.
I think we did at the beginning of November.
Yeah.
And I think I only read one book on my list.
Yeah. So of my 24 for 24 that I made, last December or early January, I read 5 out of 24 books.
What's the percentage on that? It's like
Not very high. And I DNF'd 2 of the 24.
It's a fifth, yeah. You DNF'd 2, okay. So you attempted 7.
Attempted 7.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
I mean, you had a whole year. So.
Right.
What were the books that you read and did not read? Actually, don't do that because you know what? I don't want to have to tag every single one of these.
Fine.
Just go look at Andy's Instagram, Metafictional Meathead, his post from early 2024. You'll find it. I'll put a link to the post down below. You guys can see
actually, hold on. I read 6 of the 24. I forgot to check off Bolano.
Okay. All right. That's acceptable.
I read a quarter of my 2024 TBR.
Okay. I respect it. I don't think I did a 24 for 24 because I was like, I knew myself. I was like, I'm not going to do that.
I mean, I knew when I like made the stack, I was like, I'm not going to read a large percentage of these, but like, it's just fun.
Yeah.
So it's fun to be hopeful and talk about books that you.
Jesus, everyone that follows us is just named Andy. So Andy Chu Music asks, have you been to Sheaf Street Books in Portsmouth yet? It's my favorite bookstore. So just for anyone listening, I got a very, very nice, well-intentioned message the other day. Someone said, oh, hey, Tony, I saw that you shop at Gibson's. You must be from New Hampshire. You really should check out this bookstore called the Old Number 6 Depot in Henniker. And I was like, son, they know me by name over there.
Yeah.
So, yes, both Andy and I have been to Sheaf Street. Great kind of quaint New England small bookshop. Decent selection for how small it is.
Yes.
But at this point, there's maybe 1 or 2 bookstores that I have not been to in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
And we've been to quite a few in Mass. We've been to quite a few in Connecticut, Vermont, Maine. There's a few up, like way, way up in Maine that I haven't been to.
Yeah.
Rhode Island, I've only been to a handful, although it doesn't seem like there's a ton in Rhode Island.
Been to
anyway.
a couple in Rhode Island.
Yeah.
One that was okay, had a decent selection. One that was really good.
Yeah.
That I do not remember the name of, but it was in Providence.
Yeah. So for those that don't know, I used to collect books on the sport of weightlifting. And so before I was doing BookTube, Bookstagram, all that, I was trying to visit every used bookstore in New England, which I've still not yet accomplished because it just becomes challenging, right? Like you get to all of them that are in a 2 or 3 hour drive of you, and then it's like,
now what?
do I really want to drive 5 hours one way? Do I get a hotel just to like shop at a local
and
bookstore?
get 2 books, like
if that?
Right, right.
So yeah, but used bookstores were a great source of finding these old works about weightlifting.
Yeah.
But I it's hard to say I completed the collection, but I acquired.
You did a good job. You had a lot.
Yeah, and then I sold it. So.
Yeah. No, Sheep Street is cool. I tend to trip and fall into it pretty much every time I'm in Portsmouth.
Yeah.
And because I'm addicted, I usually leave with 1 or 2 books. But I put it under the category of bookstores that have a great selection of books that I already own.
Yeah, for sure.
So like it's tough to go in there.
I mean, it makes sense.
Or I wouldn't say tough to go in there, but like,
yeah,
I don't always feel like I'm gonna like find something.
If you have limited shelf space, which they certainly do, you have to stock your store with books that people want to buy, and those are more popular books,
right?
And so, it's a totally understandable thing, but it's a great, well curated, cool little shop. There is another.
The owner's really cool.
Yes.
At least I'm assuming it's the owner. The guy's usually behind the register when I'm there.
It must be, yeah.
Every time I've gone there and like gotten, a handful of books, he's had something to say about one of them.
Yep.
So he's not just a guy that stocks the shelves.
Right.
He's well read on the books he's selling.
He's a bookseller.
Yeah.
Yeah. There is another bookstore, or at least used to be in Portsmouth, used bookstore, that's a little bit kind of like on the outskirts. I forget exactly. I don't know the Portsmouth area that well, but maybe it's on like Route 1 or something like that. And it's in a kind of like strip mall-esque building. Mm-hmm. Have you been to this place?
Yes.
You have to pay a fee to get in.
I had the weirdest experience.
That's everyone. Everyone.
So I went in, and because I remembered you telling me, like, he charges like a cover fee.
$5.
Yeah, a cover fee.
Yeah.
It costs the door.
And then if you buy something, it gets credited to the purchase. Right. Yeah.
But so I went in, and I think I had like stopped at an ATM to get cash.
Yeah.
Just to be prepared. And I went in, and the guy was just kind of standing there. And if he had asked, like, if he'd said, like, hey, there's a $5 cover, I would have paid.
Yeah.
But he didn't ask.
He didn't say anything?
He didn't say anything.
Yeah.
And I was just kind of standing there like, okay, I'm not going to offer you money to come into your store.
Yeah.
But, like, I've heard, it's kind of this weird, like, just kind of standing there. There weren't a lot of lights on.
Yeah.
The aisles were really, like, jam-packed. I don't think I could have, like, fit into any of them.
So that's what blows my mind about this store is it's, like, overflowing.
Yeah.
And I could barely fit through. And the guy that owns the store is a big fella.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how do you get through?
Yeah. And, like, I asked, like, where, like, the fiction section was.
Yeah.
And he kind of pointed to this, like, tall stack of books that, like, not on a shelf. They were just, like, piled up, like, floor to ceiling.
Yeah, buddy.
But it was only, like...
You have to, like, Jenga them out.
Right, but like I said, it was, like it was floor to ceiling, but it was only, like, 4 or 5 books wide.
Yeah.
And I was like, there's no way.
I think it's a lot of nonfiction there, like military history.
But, like, I'm also looking down, like, all these aisles where, like, like, the lights were just off.
Yeah.
And I was like, are these for sale? Like, what's down here? Like, I honestly felt like I was on the Truman Show. It's like in that store.
It's very bizarre.
So.
Yeah. I didn't have a negative experience. Like, when I went, the guy was fine. I wouldn't say he was friendly, but he wasn't rude.
Yeah.
But if you go look at, like, the Google reviews, there's a lot that are like, this guy's a dink, and
I wouldn't even.
It was just odd.
I wouldn't even call it a negative experience. It was just bizarre.
Yeah, I don't know if he's still in business or not. I have not been there in years, but anyone.
I'll tell you, when I was there, I don't think if he knew if he was still in business.
Love that. He also kind of infamously has like a very thorough adult. I don't know if it's erotica or if it's straight up pornography magazines, but he's got a collection of that stuff. I did not preview any of that when I was at the store. Okay.
Had I known that was there.
Yeah. Let's change the whole 5 stars on Google now, buddy. So Dream Villain asks, will you ever give graphic novels a chance next year? If so, may I recommend Mouse and Scalped? Yeah, I'm aware of Mouse. It's quite famous, obviously.
Yeah.
I would like to read it. I actually stumbled across like a reissue of it with all of them together because it's like a 3-part series. But it was just very expensive. It was like $35. I was like, I don't know about that. But I tried to read. I don't even recall what it was. A friend of ours let me borrow some stuff, and I just couldn't get into it. But I'm not vehemently against graphic novels. I'll check out Scalped. I've never heard of it. You've read a couple that you've enjoyed?
Yep. I've read 2 of Alan Moore's, Watchmen and V for Vendetta.
Yep.
I really enjoyed both of them. Watchmen was great.
Yeah.
That was really good. And I have another one of his, From Hell, which is all about Jack the Ripper.
Oh, interesting.
And it's really long. I think it's like over 500 pages.
Whoa. I didn't know they made graphic novels that long.
Yeah, right. So again, kind of the same thing as what you were just saying about Mouse, and Watchmen was kind of like this too. They're like serialized, so they come out as like comic book length things, and then they get compiled into this more graphic novel. But yeah, I've given them a chance. I enjoyed them. I'm certainly open to reading more. I know way back when we interviewed Ed Park, he gave us some good recommendations. I have just not really taken the time to acquire more than the couple that I've read. But yeah, I mean, if people have recommendations, and again, I said this same thing I said about True Grit applies here. If you want me to read graphic novels and you have ones that you think I will enjoy,
send them over.
Hit my DMs and I will give you my mailing address.
Fantastic.
So,
Flippin' Pages 10 asks,
Flippin' Pages.
Do you have any must-haves while you're reading? A spot, a drink, or etc.?
I don't know if I'd call it like a must-have, but I've got a chair set up in the corner of my library. I do think it's nice to have a space that is, I don't know if I would say like necessarily like dedicated to reading.
Yeah.
But like, primarily used for reading. I don't particularly like to read on the couch, like in front of the, obviously not with the TV on, but like in front of the TV, with my phone in arm's reach, with the Xbox controller right in front of me. Mm-hmm. So kind of just like a space to shut out distractions. Like if I can help it, I'll just leave my phone in the other room and then walk into the library.
Yeah.
Sometimes like this morning I did some reading before I came over here, and I had my phone with me just so I could keep track of the time. Just check it every now and then. But if I, this afternoon, when I want to get some more serious reading done, if I'm, probably going to read more of The Tunnel this afternoon, like I'm going to do my best to leave my phone in the other room.
Yeah.
Because that's a book that I don't want to be distracted while I'm reading.
Definitely.
It's always nice to have, some water or a nice cold Monster Energy drink.
Please sponsor us.
Caffeinated beverage of your choice. But, I do have the convenience of running water in my apartment. So if I get thirsty, I'll walk 100 steps.
Yeah.
Not even 50 steps, and fill up a glass.
Nice.
So that's pretty much it for me. And a nice lamp for some added light.
Yeah, so that's really my only must-have is my book lights. I have 3 of them. I have a favorite. That's my first choice, but if it's low on battery, needs to be charged, then I'll use one of the other 2.
What a nerd.
Yeah.
Your favorite book light.
It has the best brightness, and like it's light, but it has a good flexibility of the neck.
Yep.
So
Yep. I've got a pair of reading glasses.
I do. Have those
I don't
too.
always use them.
Same, yeah.
It's tough because like I do have pretty good eyesight.
Yeah.
So it's more of like a pretty low magnification.
Yep.
The prescription or whatever. It's more so like if my eyes get tired or the print is like really small.
Yeah.
But also sometimes it has that like adverse effect of where like it's magnifying my vision. So, sometimes if you put on like somebody, someone's like blind and you put on their glasses, like it starts to hurt your eyes.
Yeah.
Sometimes I run into that.
Yeah.
So it depends on what I'm reading, depends on how I'm feeling. It's mostly like a convenience thing. So sometimes I use them, sometimes I don't. So I wouldn't really call that a must-have.
Yeah, same. Gabriella Kova asks, favorite ice cream brand? I'm actually not much of an ice cream person, so I guess my go-to, if I'm just gonna have some in the freezer, is probably Ben and Jerry's.
Yeah,
just 'cause they have the crazy flavors, but
right. Ben and Jerry's make some great stuff. Tillamook makes some great ice cream.
Never even heard of it.
Lately, I've been on a real Chipwich kick.
Chipwich.
I think. I don't know if that's Nestle.
This question must have been for you. I can't even remember the last time I had ice cream.
Oh, I had it last night. I had two Chipwiches last night. Is it Nestle? But yeah, any sort of ice cream sandwich.
So what's your go-to flavor?
I mean, I like stuff that's chocolatey.
Okay.
Yeah, I like stuff that's chocolatey. Half baked is a great Ben and Jerry's flavor.
Yeah. Careful on the stem.
Sorry.
Picking that up.
I'm trying to think. Oh God, what's the other one?
Yeah, Ben and Jerry's. I actually like the Cherry Garcia.
Yep.
And Katie, what's the one that you like? She probably has headphones in. Is it Tonight Dough?
Yep, that's one. That's a good one. Fish food.
What's in that?
I think there's like marshmallows and chocolate and caramel.
Damn.
Chocolate fishies. It's Fish PH like the band.
Yeah.
There's a peanut butter half baked.
Nice.
It's really good.
I like anything with peanut butter. That's usually my jam.
Yeah.
Like a Moose Tracks or something.
Yep. But I would say like my top go-to gold standard is a good ice cream sandwich.
Nice. Gabriella, what's your favorite ice cream? You let us know.
Yeah.
Tracy, I guess, on Instagram asks, how did you two find each other? I want a book buddy like you have in each other. Andy used to be in my employ.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's not that cool of a story.
And actually, before I was an employee of yours, you were my coach. I paid you money
Right.
to tell me what to do with my workouts.
Yeah. Just mutual friends, and then we both found out that we each were readers.
Yeah, I got into reading more. You had already had a reading habit, and it kind of kicked back up again. And
Yeah, I definitely think I read. I mean, actually, it's not a guess. I definitely read more now than I did before.
yeah, yeah, kind of got lucky.
Yeah. Let's see what else we have here. Daphne asks, how do you choose which book to read next? Do you make a TBR based on how you feel? We actually did a whole episode on this, so just go check that out. It's titled, I'll put a link below, but I think it's titled How to Choose the Best Books for You or something
like that. Yeah.
It was maybe in the last 3 or 4 months. Which book stuck with you the longest in 2024? That's a great question.
That's a great question.
And it came from Peter Losi.
I would think I'm going to answer this kind of two parts. I think the book that affected me the most would be Hard Rain Falling. That was just an emotional gut punch.
Yeah.
So I would say as far as like the most a single book affected me, probably that. In terms of like long lasting effect that has inspired potential future reading, I would probably say The Savage Detectives. Just because, I talked about this a little bit on the episode we recorded, and then it'll be out preceding this one. It's just kind of kickstarted a new authorial obsession.
Yeah.
So I think those would be my 2 picks.
Yeah, I'd probably say Hard Rain Falling and The 40 Days of Musa Dog by Franz Werfel would be my picks. Great question, though. Okay, we only have a few more here. Oh, Jesus, where'd they go? Oh, did I accidentally close that? No, I have to pull them all up again. God damn it, Tony. Idiot. Here we go. We did that one. This is interesting. Kamaga-kan, probably butchering that, said, what made you start a channel on YouTube? I don't know. I think I've always been into making videos.
Yeah.
So I had like a video camera like right out of high school, and I was like kind of the guy that was learning how to edit and always had my camera with me and filming stuff. For a while, I thought I wanted to work in the film industry, which I decided I did not want to do. But I just like love the idea of YouTube, that you could just create something and put it out there, and there's really no barrier to entry. So it's just a fun creative outlet. And then, I think with YouTube in particular, you want to find that balance between making things you want to make, but also things that people want to see. And it's just kind of a fun challenge.
Yeah.
Any advice to a struggling student who really wants to get their grades up? And that comes from Apples and Pies 2024.
I don't think I'm qualified to answer that. I study.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually a terrible student in high school until I had some motivation.
Yeah.
So my dad basically sat me down and he's like, your grades are terrible. You're not going to get into college if you continue doing this. What do we need to do to make you get better grades? And I said, give me your car. He had an Audi.
All right.
I wanted his car. And he's like, okay. He goes, if you make honor roll, I'll give you my car. So
Wow.
I did. And he gave me the car. And I actually realized I grew up thinking I was pretty stupid. And then when I started really having like a motivation to perform well in school,
Yeah.
I realized like, actually, I'm not dumb. I might actually be a little smart, or maybe slightly above average. And I think it's hard to answer this question because I don't know, like you in middle school, you in high school, you in college,
Right.
like whatever. But just realizing that there's multiple ways to learn and just figuring out what works best for you is really a good place to start. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't really have a good answer to that.
Empanya Danny 13 asks, if you were to get a tattoo inspired by a book, what would it be? You have more tattoos than I do. Do you have any book inspired tattoos now?
I don't currently have any that are inspired by books. I am sure at some point in the future I will end up getting one.
Yeah.
It's not for lack of desire.
Sure.
I just don't really have any ideas that I want to get tattooed yet. The easy choice is something Gravity's Rainbow related.
Sure.
Just want to come up with something that's, I wouldn't say like really obscure, but something like the rocket would be like a really obvious kind of inspiration from that.
Yep.
Which I'd like to go with something a little bit more deeper than that, not just a rocket. So
yeah. Yeah, I always thought about it would be cool to get like one of the passages from Moby Dick tattooed on my back.
Yeah.
Just cover my whole back in writing.
Yeah.
But nah, never going to do that because I'm just too old.
Yeah. I'm not really big on the idea of like script or text. Tattoos are like, you know, big blocks of text.
Yeah.
Up a tattoo. Once I get an idea I like, then we'll see how it goes. But I don't really have any in mind right now.
Kist reads books. My buddy Michael Kist asks, how can Philadelphia and Pittsburgh be in the same state? You know, it's something I wonder about every single day. Okay, well, let's wrap it there. All right, so thanks for sticking with us for this Q&A episode. If there's any questions you have for us, drop them in the comments, and we will get to them eventually. And some episode will be up next week. Join us then.
Yeah.
See ya.
Bye-bye.